We all wear a face for the world. Sometimes it's confidence. Sometimes it's kindness. Sometimes it's calm. Robert Greene, in his brilliant The Laws of Human Nature, calls this the law of role-playing. People present a version of themselves to win acceptance, protection, or advantage. In this video, we explore the masks people wear, why they exist, the most common types, how they tend to crack under pressure, and what that means for us at work, in dating, and across life. We're not chasing gotchas. We're learning to see clearly, move wisely, and bring our own outer image closer to our inner character. We live in groups, and groups reward presentation. From childhood, we learn which traits get praise and which get punished, and a public persona takes shape. Greene's law of role-playing sits alongside the law of narcissism, everyone wants to be seen a certain way, and the law of repression. Parts of ourselves get pushed out of awareness and covered with a more palatable image. Masks are not always malicious, they're adaptive. They smooth interactions, protect vulnerabilities, and create leverage. The problem isn't that masks exist. It's when we mistake the mask for the person and build our decisions on a performance instead of the pattern. The saint or do-gooder, we recognize the public virtue, generosity, high ethics, impeccable intentions. The deeper current often includes a need for moral control or a subtle superiority. Under stress or disagreement, this mask can tighten into judgment and guilt-tripping. At work, it appears as principled obstruction that keeps power centralized. In dating, it can show up as approval tied to compliance. In life, it's the friend who cares deeply but needs to be right. The charmer or charismatic, we recognize warmth, attention, and social ease. Under the surface, there can be opportunism or transactional focus. Denial or delay tends to flip the temperature quickly. At work, charm glides through doors until resources are scarce. Then the tone shifts. In dating, early chemistry is high. Depth is proven when curiosity persists after the win is not immediate. In life, we notice an on-off pattern tied to usefulness. The victim or helpless one, we recognize the story of being wronged, unlucky, or perpetually misunderstood. What often sits beneath is resentment and a covert bid for control through guilt. Under pressure, responsibility disperses, solutions get rejected, cycles repeat. At work, this looks like blame that moves faster than facts. In dating, it feels like constant rescue missions. In life, the pattern is crisis followed by crisis, with little interest in patterns that would break the cycle. The confident alpha, we recognize assertiveness, decisiveness, and certainty. Beneath, there can be a fear of exposure and a need to dominate the frame. Real challenge often reveals fragility. The mask hardens, gets louder, or seeks a new audience. At work, this person thrives in spotlight moments, but may struggle with collaborative correction. In dating, early leadership feels attractive until feedback lands like an attack. In life, respect is demanded before it is earned. The reformer or crusader, we recognize mission, clarity, and moral energy. Underneath, there can be anger and a hunger for control dressed as virtue. Under stress, nuance evaporates. Dissent becomes betrayal. At work, we see policy overreach justified by the greater good. In dating, principles become purity tests. In life, this person can build movements and also break relationships that don't mirror their zeal. the cool, detached intellectual. We recognize composure, analysis, and precision. What's often masked is fear of emotion or social discomfort. When relationships demand vulnerability, the mask retreats into theory or critique. At work, this is a valuable thinker who may dismiss the human element. In dating, conversations are interesting, but intimacy feels distant. In life, the body is ignored until it forces attention. The humble servant. We recognize helpfulness, modesty, and deference. Beneath, there can be a need for validation or repressed ambition that seeks power indirectly. Stress reveals resentment. The mask stays polite while the energy withdraws or maneuvers sideways. At work, this is the indispensable helper who quietly accumulates leverage. In dating, it's caretaking that becomes a scoreboard. In life, we feel gratitude and also a subtle pressure to repay. How masks crack and what reveals the person beneath? Greene's guidance is simple. Look for incongruence, observe under pressure, and track patterns. Words are easy, habits under constraint tell the truth. When time is short, when a plan is blocked, when praise shifts to someone else, masks slip. The law of compulsive behavior says repetition is the signature. We notice how someone treats people with less power, how they handle no, and whether they return to the same moves after apologies. Micro-leaks, jokes that sting, quick flashes of contempt, slips of the tongue act like thread ends we can tug on with time. We don't need to confront the mask. Patience and context expose the structure. What this means at work, we operate in arenas filled with curated identities. The saint defends ethics to keep the steering wheel. The charmer collects allies while outcomes lag. The alpha drives speed and breaks trust when corrected. The intellectual over-optimizes logic and undervalues morale. The humble servant becomes the unofficial gatekeeper. We learn to separate presentation from pattern. We evaluate reliability over quarters, not meetings. Composure under pressure, not charisma at kickoff. Credit sharing and accountability, not slogans. We become less reactive to surfaces and more anchored in trajectories, which improves hiring, partnership, and promotion decisions. What this means in dating, early interactions are theater. We expect best foot forward and look for the moments when the script runs out. Delays, small disappointments, and responses to boundaries. The charmer's sparkle is delightful. The question is whether curiosity endures when access is not instant. The alpha's decisiveness can feel safe. The question is whether feedback lands as a threat. The victim's sensitivity is moving. The question is whether responsibility ever lands at home. Instead of forcing reveals, we let time and mild stress do the work, and listen to the pattern line rather than the last spike of chemistry or conflict. What this means across life, social media amplifies masks. Virtue signals, highlight reels, hot takes. We become connoisseurs of congruence, admiring polish when it is backed by substance, withholding judgment when it's not yet clear, and declining to reward performance that consistently diverges from lived behavior. With friends and family, we notice whether care is paired with respect, whether advice shows up more than curiosity, and whether apologies precede change. Our choices about who gets close and how much we invest begin to align with reality instead of appearances. The mask we wear, Greene doesn't let us off the hook. We have a mask too. The image we curate, stoic, agreeable, high status, selfless, serves us and can also trap us. The law of repression suggests the parts we disown don't disappear, they leak sideways. The law of narcissism reminds us that we want to be seen a certain way, that desire can overtake the work of becoming that way. We notice where our mask protects what's still tender, where it buys time to grow, and where it replaces growth altogether. Over time, the goal isn't to abandon masks, it's to bring the outer image closer to inner character, so the gap narrows and strain drops. Relating to masks without cynicism means recognizing personas as adaptive and sometimes necessary, while refusing to build decisions on them. Give time, vary context, and watch patterns. Let no disagreement and scarcity reveal priorities. Reward congruence by moving aligned people closer, and let chronic incongruence drift to the edges without drama. Stop mistaking charm for commitment, intensity for depth, or slogans for values. And quietly fill your life with people whose outside matches their inside. Seeing masks clearly makes us harder to fool and easier to work with. At work, we choose better partners and projects and reduce friction. In dating, we give connection a fair chance without funding performances. In life, we conserve energy by exiting loops that never change, and doubling down where patterns are solid. And as we watch ourselves too, we find the rare alignment, where who we are, how we show up, and what we do begin to rhyme. Live this way, decisions get cleaner, relationships sturdier, and ambition lighter, because we're no longer dragging illusions along.